Hello, dear friends. I'm speaking to you from Montreal, Canada, where I'm visiting. And I'd like to say a few words about honoring one's parents, something that I said in upstate New York about a week ago, in the course of last week, really. So we have two places in the Torah where it says to honor your parents in the Decalogue. That's in Shmot chapter 20 and Devarim chapter 5. Kabed et avicha v'et imecha, to honor your father and your mother, Leman yarichun yamecha, in order that it shall prolong your days. I'm just looking for the exact quote. Leman yarichun yamecha la'adama she'Hashem Elohecha noten lach, on the land that God has promised you. Now, what does it mean that prolong your days? Does it mean that if somebody didn't live long, so they didn't honor their parents? Of course, if you want to think it that way, you could always counter argue, okay, maybe they should have lived less than that, but prolonged. But the Talmud actually doesn't understand it that way. And the Talmud in Dorasha, which is in Chagiga, says about both cases, both the case of honoring your parents, where it talks about a prolonged life, and also the case of Shiluach Haken, where if a person sees eggs in a nest, they're supposed to shoo away the mother bird first before they take the eggs from the nest. And it also talks about a prolonged life. So the Talmud says there's a drasha, le'olam shekul aruch, that it's not prolong your life in this world, it's the fact that you will merit to live in the world to come, in the world of everlasting life. However, it is possible also to take it in the sense that I once heard that somebody once said, why do Ashkenazic Jews, which is very common here in North America, wish each other on a yortzeit when you have a memorial for a parent, they wish each other a long life. In Israel, we just say Aliyat Neshama, then we made the deceased have an elevation of soul. But here there seems to be an interesting custom to wish a long life. So it appears that the possible answer is very simple. If it says in the Torah that when you honor your parents, you're going to have a long life, so we're wishing a person a long life because we see they're honoring their parents. So let it come to fruition. Let it come to fruition. So I thought that was an interesting interpretation. The Torah, though, in Vayikra, chapter 19, which according to the Midrash Tanchuma, also encapsulates the 10 commandments within all the various mitzvot, the various commandments which are mentioned there, also talks about this one. And there it says, right at the beginning of Parshat Kedoshim, which talks about that a person should sanctify themselves. In chapter 19, verse 3, Ish aviv v'imo tirau, every man shall fear his mother and his father and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord. And here, interestingly enough, it says mother before father. Now, the Talmud understands honoring your parents to mean things which are practical or verbal. Don't stop them while they're saying something. Don't interrupt them. Don't try to contradict them. A certain amount of honor that you honor your parents. And don't sit in their place at the table. Give them a little bit of respect, whatever. So honoring your parents in various deeds or verbally. Then, but what about this one? What does it mean that ish avivi motirau? What does it mean to fear your parents? And why is the mother before the father? Rashi says the mother is before the father because a child has a tendency to fear the father more than the mother. And so it says you should also fear your mother, not just your father. Where it comes to kavod, kabed, to honor, very often a person honors their mother before their father because their mother was the one who was with them when they were small and spent a lot of time with them, very often, sometimes more than they spent with the father. These are some of the interpretations. What is honoring? Honoring can be done during a person's lifetime, and it's good to honor your parents during their lifetime, not just after. Let them know it. It's like somebody once said to me, as my parents were aging, says, you never know how much time there is. Don't forget to make that phone call, to be in touch, and you want to say the things that you want to say now. You don't want to wait. So, if you want to say that you love them, so tell them that you love them. Why wait? Not everything has to be pushed off, because there's always a time that you might not have that opportunity. Honoring, therefore, can be done during a person's lifetime and even after. The burial itself in our tradition is called chesed shel emet, which basically means a kindness with no remuneration, because they're not there anymore to thank you. Chesed shel emet. But there are other things that can be done in honoring after the lifetime, is over to the reciting of the Kaddish, studying in the memory of a parent, doing a good deed in the memory of a parent, giving tzedakah in the memory of a parent, lots of things. And probably the greatest thing is to try to walk in their ways, to do the things that they taught you, to emulate your parents, or at least the good parts of your parents. B'ra mezakah haba, it says in the Zohar, that the child can bring merit to the deceased parent. But what about yirah? What does this mean, to fear your mother and your father? And why does it say ish, which means a grown person? What is that all about? I want to give my interpretation of this idea. My interpretation that here the term fear is not fear but reverence. You see, children fear their parents. But here it says specifically in Vayikra, in Leviticus, it says ish, which is a full-grown person. So a full-grown person doesn't usually fear their parents anymore, but they can revere their parents. What does it mean to revere your parents? Well, there's sometimes your parents give you advice. When you're a young person, you either accept it or don't accept it. Sometimes you think that you're smarter, you know better. Children have that tendency. That's the way we grow up and learn independence. But as life goes on, there's certain things that your parents taught you that you realize, hey, they make a lot of sense. In fact, now that I'm going through the motions and aging, I start realizing a lot of things they said actually makes sense later on in life. I remember one time my friend Avi, who I'm staying at his place here in Montreal, once said to me after my father had passed away, and I said to myself, what would my father say in this situation? So he said to me, what do you mean? Of course you know what he would say in this situation. You knew him for so many years. How could you not know what he would say in this situation? I said to him, you know what? Maybe you're right. So there are a lot of things that we will remember of our parents after they passed away. And a lot of these things help us in life too. And then as we realize that these things can also be helpful to us, then we start to revere our parents. It comes a little bit later in life. Or in other words, we start to appreciate their experience, their advice, the fact that they said it because they wanted to help us. And we even excuse things that maybe they said and were mistaken. But we learn to appreciate a lot of things. That's the way I understand Ish imo vaviv tirau. That when you're an Ish, when you're more mature, you will start to revere many of the things that your parents said, because you'll start to appreciate the value of what they told you based on their experience in life. So, in general, then, there's honoring one's parents. There's the way I explained to revere one's parents. And, we're all connected in this long line of the previous generations and the future generations. And we try to emulate, we try to do what we can, we try to do things that are based on our own talents. And all this becomes, of course, the greatest honoring of a parent, the fact that you want to become a good person, a moral person, a spiritual person. This is the greatest honor. And this is the way I understand kabed et avicha v'et imecha. Shalom, shalom.